Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Service Transportation Committee meeting to order for Tuesday, April 23rd at approximately 9:12 a.m. First item, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll take introductions. We'll take a roll call. I'm Tom Smith from Sherrill, from the Town Council of Sherrill.
Scott Weber, NERC staff.
Laura Bob, Nursery staff.
David Wright, Gary Public Transit.
George Topol, Union Township, Porter County.
Mark Waddell, Town of Chesterton.
Charles Baratsky, Emergency Staff.
Kevin Lee, NERC staff.
Alex Lester, Public Fairman Cypher. Tom Deadwood, Emergency Staff.
Grace Benninger, Nursery staff.
Thank you. Next item is public. Is there any public comment on agenda items? Nothing? Okay. We'll go right into the minutes of the November 14th, 2023. You'll find that on page 1 of your packet.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes, November 14th meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is notice of funding availability and the scoring discussion. You'll find that on page 2 to 5 of your packet. And that will be Charles.
Is this on? Is this?
I think you should escape. Yeah. Get the.
Is this on there? No.
Or do you load that up or no?
No.
Okay.
I can load it.
Then I will just go through the roadway modifications as we've got it right now. We'll go through the application portion first, and then I'll follow through with the rules and guidelines for the application. Everything on the first portion is pretty much standard. We kind of did some clarification on how we calculate the funding for PE and right-of-way. It's 7%. Your initial, it's what you're allowed is 7% of your initial CN cost. CN cost, by the way, containing CE also. Moving on to the second page, just a note on question number 2, local roads may or may not be eligible. When I initially put this in there, local roads, we're not, local streets I should say, local streets we're not eligible, but under certain guidelines, under the Protect, local streets are eligible. So I just put a note in there that local streets may or may not be eligible.
Do we want to give any points there, Charles?
For local streets?
Yeah.
No. I think we're okay, but we did have a couple applications last time
Okay.
for local streets.
I noticed we have minor collectors 0. Shouldn't that be at least 1 or something?
We can,
If that's higher than local street, we're not gonna get anything.
okay.
I was just questioning. I'm just asking.
I'm game, so.
Just question for clarification. So you say that it's Protect might be the only or one of the only funding categories that would be eligible for local streets. Would any protected projects be of the typology of roadway modifications applications, or would they be a separate application? I mean, I guess
You could apply for protect funds on this, if you were to replace a culvert,
yeah.
for instance. So,
Yeah, I'm not trying to change the point, I was just questioning because it was 0, I was like, okay.
well, this is the place to talk about it, so. Actually, we do need to adjust it anyway. I haven't gone through and calculated all the scores. So, for instance, on one of the other ones, I went through and added up all the maximum points, and it was like 130 points. So I gave it back to whoever staff member was to let me know what was important. So, and then we may have the same thing here. So,
I would
we
think,
can,
yeah, I think it could be.
I'll highlight that.
Yeah.
And I'll also add local street. And if you're looking for protect funds, the local street is eligible, so.
And, yeah, maybe that's a point or something.
Question number 4, we added the NOPA steering committee did recommend adding a category of 18,000 roads in the region that have an AADT of 18,000 or greater.
So we need to change that maximum points?
Yes,
Okay. So that's 8 now, is the maximum?
I think I changed it to 6 because actually you could get 4 points or 2 points if you're between 8 and 12,000, depending on how you look at it. So I do need to correct that in there.
Oh, okay. So, here, yeah, the more.
So I think I changed it to 6 for.
Yeah, right. If you're over 18,000, you get 6 points?
Yes,
Gotcha. So then, it's 12 to 18, that is 4 points,
yes,
and then 8 to 12 is 2 points, gotcha.
correct.
Got it. That is kind of confusing.
And then question number 5, is this proposed project requesting HTIP funds? Yes, is 5 points. I might adjust that up, especially in the light of recent the road school, those units for road school, as well as federal highways project emphasis areas is hitting pretty hard on safety, so I may up that.
And Charles, just to also add the clarification here, in the old application, there was only one question about safety, and it was the next question. So now we're awarding points just for a project seeking HSIP funds. They're getting a bonus.
Right. And then on question number 6, there's always been a little bit of ambiguity in the past about applicants stretching the boundaries of what is connected to. Some say it was, we were like, well, you go a quarter of a mile and then it really stretches into a third of a mile because, so we kind of narrowed it down to directly. So adding the word directly in question number 6.
Which would mean between the beginning and ending project limits.
Yeah, I think actually the term is looking for that.
Like later on, like question 10, it says immediate directly connected to. Like,
And part of this will be aided by having better maps this
Yeah,
time around,
map.
where you'll be able to
Right.
find a better resolution.
yeah, that makes sense.
I think I put in proposed project limits. Change a project area to proposed project limits. And then going along with that same theme on question number 7, I put down 400 yards, which is about a quarter of a mile. So, and then I also changed it to the questions if you got a parking lot. So I put in the property of the major employment center. So it's not to the front door or to the employee entrance, it's to the property itself. So, question 9 is a new one, is the transit access of the location of the project area, including bus stops, commuter rail stations. So,
Just a question, I don't know if David, because I don't do transit a lot, but like, is there a difference between what's the difference between a rapid bus stop and a bus stop? Is that?
A
is that
rapid bus
significant?
stop is a higher frequency line,
Higher frequency
Yeah.
line.
basically more than 40-minute service.
So that would deserve more points.
Yeah.
Gotcha, thanks.
question 10, we added the term immediately directly connected to project network and connectivity. Question 11, again, defining that, getting the definition down to within 400 yards, which is a quarter mile. Question 12, is the project requesting CMAQ funds? Again, we're looking to award projects that are going after CMAQ and HSIP funds.
You can't do them both, can you?
No, I mean, no, because CMAQ goes after congestion mitigation and air quality. HSIP is safety.
Safety, yeah.
So,
So you're not gonna,
in other words, CMAQ would, the level of service would go from, say, D to B.
yeah.
Whereas HSIP looks at the level of safety, which is doing the same thing and looking at crash frequency and crash costs. So other states use level of safety. In Indiana, we have RoadHat, which defines that level of safety to the index of crash costs, or comparable to the index of crash costs and the index of crash frequency.
It's a little confusing to someone who's not thoroughly into that. Congestion, safety, they kind of interlock at times.
Yeah.
I do, but when you're looking at level of service, you're not looking at, for instance, Main downtown, you do not want to have, you want it to be more congested, because that means you've got more vibrancy. Correct?
Yep, but
If
just
people
one
are
safety.
speeding through your downtown, which they shouldn't be, or all your street, your local shops are, you want people to slow down and get out and walk and so on. And when you're walking, you're crossing the street and stuff like that. So you want vehicles to slow down. Level of service only applies to motorized vehicles. Correct?
Yeah.
So, level of safety applies to all modes of transportation.
It is somewhat confusing, though. I mean, for someone who's not respected.
Okay. And George, you also, no offense, but you do not live in, or your occupation is not in the town center. So, but you can certainly see, like say Valparaiso or Chesterton or Portage, Central Avenue, you don't want to be going, you don't want to have a 40-mile speed limit through Central Avenue.
Do we need a note, or like, I don't know, Scott, Charles, if it matters, like Q, question 5 and 12, that somewhere says you can only get points for one of them, one or the other?
Might be a good idea.
Actually, you would, it's kind of like the bridge and question 1 and 4. No, question 1 and 3. You're going to get one or the other.
Okay.
So,
We probably should explain that somewhere though in the application. Just, well, first of all, not everyone is here right now hearing this discussion. that is being recorded, but we might, if we're,
Asterisks with a footnote.
yeah.
Yeah,
if
that's all I was
mentioned-
So I mean, I could put in there and actually, then when I add it all up, it could be 105 or 110 points total, because you're not gonna get the bridge or the road.
Yeah.
You're gonna get one or the other.
Yeah.
And same with CMAC and
CMAC
HIP, you're
and
gonna get one or the other.
Yeah, or maybe it's in your rule sheet, you doing a rule sheet again, like,
Yeah, we'll go through the rule sheet,
oh, yeah, maybe.
and maybe I explain it in there.
Yeah.
Question 13, does the project include living streets elements? We changed that because before, if you remember, it had, you have a certain number of elements. And the idea that you could have a bioretention pond the size of this table and get credit for it, and it could be a mile-long project, which is ludicrous. So we changed it to square feet, per 1,000 square feet.
Oh, okay. Every 1,000 square feet of the feature.
Yes,
Got it.
so
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
before it listed, you had 1 or 2 or 3 items. Like I said, you could have 3 items the size of this table on a mile long.
Not really doing anything, but
It's not doing anything.
I like that.
Question 15, is this a legacy project going on? And I had down here to discuss it. Trying to define a legacy project, and I think we're just going to stick with,
It has to have a
Ron.
DES number, right?
Yes.
It has to have a DES.
right?
Is there a list of the projects that fit that category?
That's a good question. Like, do you already have that list? Like, you know what?
I know.
If you have a DES number, you know you have a DES number.
Yeah.
But I'm
No, for legacy.
wondering for the broad, broad scope, the 3 counties, which ones are targeted?
I can get that because usually those projects don't have CN funds in them. Those projects scored well enough to be awarded CN funds, but we didn't have enough CN funds to give them. So we gave them PE or right-of-way funds so they could get started, so that next year of the next NOFA, they would be sitting pretty good towards.
Yeah, I'm sure Jeff
Possibly
Hewitt-
get more
Jeff
points.
Hewitt would
Right.
like to know that too.
What's that?
Jeff Hewitt would be interested in that too.
Well, see, now Jeff Hewitt or Cherville and Porter County have 2 transformational projects.
Right.
Those projects are big and grandiose, are needed, but they are in an area that normally, because they're in a new roadway, they're functioning.
Well, I was just thinking in terms of when we look at the big picture for everything and planning as to which ones are already in the mix and should be considered. So
Right.
We have a big picture of it.
And actually, at the last NOFA, we had a project in Valparaiso, 400, 130 and 400, which did not have federal funds for construction on it. Another project, I think, was Klein Avenue, the extension in St. John, which did not have CN funds on. Those are 2 projects right off the tip of my tongue. And I think Portage, I think, is another project that has funds on Central Avenue, the next phase of Central Avenue. Those are 3 projects off the top of my head.
Well, I don't need the list right now, but,
I know.
Just going over a period of time and trying to recollect which ones are, so other people know that come to the meetings regularly.
Yeah, do we have any that, like, just on the, I can't think of it off the top of my head, that really haven't even started design? Because that's almost not, right? If they've been sitting here for 5, 7 years and they've got a DES number, but they haven't done anything. I liked how you they have approved NEPA or something, like maybe they have to be somewhere in the project phase, like so they're skipping.
Yeah.
Or just
And
discuss
actually,
it into our entities.
NDOT has tightened
That's true.
their NEPA approval process, so we really can't have So it's really difficult for an LPA to have NEPA approval without a DES number. In fact, I think it's almost impossible nowadays.
No, but how far back do we want to go to give them the 5 points? Like, if they haven't done anything, I guess that's what I'm asking. Like, I don't know of any example off the top of my head, Charles. I was just, we're going to award somebody that maybe has a DES number from 7 years ago, but hasn't progressed for you or anything.
So
They're gonna get five.
I will bring up, there was one project that
I'm not trying to.
that was
think of anybody.
awarded. It was awarded PE funds. Actually in 2020, it was awarded PE funds. And as of this year, as of probably last fall, they hadn't even started it. So, and actually, those PE funds were pushed out,
Yeah.
and pushed out, and pushed out, because it was at that time, and this was with the city mayor, the city of Cary, Mayor Freeman Wilson had a project that she was really excited about and wanted to push, and so we started it. They were awarded funds for it, and then the subsequent mayors, I think it was actually before mayor. Anyway, and it was subsequent mayors that just didn't get any traction. So we took that funding away. We talked internally with the city, and they just didn't see that project going anywhere. And they had certain requirements that they needed to get before they could be awarded those PE funds. And like I said, they just lost interest in it. So, yeah, and it happens.
Politically, it happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Question 16, we added the term complete streets. And then changed it to three or more policy plans, 2 policy plans, we get 1 point. Question 18, again, goes back to the stretching of the rubber band and how far the project is. So directly connected to the level of service. This was one of those projects that people were saying that this intersection, which is half a mile away from a corridor or arterial, that it kind of, so. Moving on down, question 23, this is legacy project. What is the status of the design engineering? So.
Back on Charles, on 21 and 22, do you need to adjust those points, the maximum points?
What I'll do, like I said, I'll go through and add up all the points.
Oh,
And then if I have more than 100 or less than 100, I'll work with Scott, and we'll kind of have him tell me what's more important, what areas are more important, and reduce or expand the points for those projects.
So the intention is to add up to it.
Yes.
oh, the goal is 100.
So someone could get 100 points.
Okay.
And question number 24, this has been the NOFA Improvement Committee, the working group, wanted this question taken away. So, because we do ask this question in the first part, does this,
Where?
on the top right bottom, on page 2, the very first page.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So, every project in Northwest Indiana is going to touch a railroad, it seems. We just have so many railroad crossings and tracks, and that it seems like every project touches at least one railroad. So we shouldn't be penalizing a project because they're touching the railroad. So the discussion has been just to eliminate this question.
you're saying if the project, so their issue was, there's projects that don't touch a railroad, so you're getting 2 bonus points
Yes,
for no interaction?
yeah, because it's difficult to deal with the railroad. But I mean, that pretty much eliminates every project in Chesterton, right?
I would change my project. I would
Yeah.
change my project so I
Yeah,
don't
so,
cross those
right.
railroads.
But that doesn't mean that those intersections or those projects that are touching those railroads doesn't mean that they're less important.
Yeah, because a lot of intersections could have a railroad going right beside them or through them.
Right. So, we're pulling that project out, or that question out.
So 24 will approve that one.
Yes. And then that's it for the application. Are there any comments on the application?
25, 26.
For the changes.
And 26 and 27 are just, there's no points there, they're more for what are the wishes of the
How
town.
about brownie points for people that show up for meetings regularly?
That has actually been discussed, has been discussed several times.
We had that, we used to have it on a.
Right.
You know, for
Yeah.
everybody to have more people in attendance.
That's something in,
Scores taking attendance.
it's something that staff has never really, and actually I got looking at it and how you would award points and everything. And we could award points for attending commission meetings, we could award points for attending a topical committee meeting. But then it really starts to get skewed because we have, for instance, George, you attend pretty much every meeting we have here. So anything that you do,
I have really
you
no
could get
projects
100
every
points. Anything you do, you could get 100 points because if you attend the EMPC and the SDC and the 3PC and the T-Rock, you know, there's 16 meetings a year plus the commission meetings. So now you're at 10. So the question is,
It could be just if you reach a certain plateau, you get an extra point, you know. If that
Right.
community attended, let's say, you know, one for being over 50%, one being for under 50%, no attendance, 0. You know, I mean, just a thought.
and it might be easier than as we move forward.
Mhm.
That's a question on, like, for Scott, like on question 25, the environmental justice map. Is there any, how many EJ areas are there in Porter and LaPorte County? So that's what always might be, because sometimes we get 0 points for any of our projects that we would ever present. But other areas are getting.
Well, and LaPorte and Michigan City do have EJ areas.
Okay, good.
And based on the census geography, so like census.
There is some.
Yeah.
And we do provide that map, so. I know Scott didn't print off the rules or the procedures. And I'll just, being he didn't do that, I will just kind of read through these. Question 1, sponsors must provide a guarantee of their match. That's pretty much the standard. Number 2, the sponsor must have a current ADA transition and Title VI plan on file with NERC. I think we reworded that one because we do not keep those on file. I think the state has those on file, and I also think that you're required to have that, period, to have, to get any sort of funding. NERC's Living Streets policy and guidelines shall be followed. The guidelines give several ideas for potential inclusions, including various items for various costs. Communities may choose to limit the additional cost of living street items to 15% of the total cost for construction without penalty. And this was largely, Mr. Hewitt largely advocated for this. Some of these busier arterials that we have, and namely, I'm thinking of 41, US 30, right-of-way is a premium. And if you're at $1 million per acre along there, adding a row of trees or adding right-of-way to add trees, for instance, could almost kill the project. So that's where that's how that kind of is limited in there. So. Number 4, PE and right-of-way phases will be limited to a combined total of 7.5% of the total estimated construction costs. So that hasn't changed.
So question on step 2 on the sheet application, maybe we go to clarify, it says, do you want funds for PE right away? So which one? Like, I thought we funded both. That's kind of confusing there.
So we do fund both, but at the onset, we don't. We only fund one or the other. So usually at the end of the year, if I have extra funds,
Okay, that's what you're.
that's where that comes in.
But from the beginning, it's 7.5% is
Right.
total you could ask.
Right. And moving forward with this NOFA, we are no longer going to be awarding 80% or 90% for PE and right-of-way. We're going to ratchet that down to probably 70% of the total cost. We're finding that especially on right-of-way, there's a lot of funds that you're going in with your appraisals, you're asking for right-of-way, your appraisals, but sometimes costs come in higher, sometimes they come in lower. So if we lower that down, then, like I said, what we're finding is there's several times that we have $15,000, $20,000 left that's obligated but unused, and therefore it just disappears. And so we may be losing $100,000 a year for projects because we gave it to you, and once we obligate the funds, we can't use them anywhere else. You can't use them anywhere else in your project. So you cannot take awarded, obligated PE funds and transfer them to construction or transfer them to right-of-way. They have to stay with PE. And if you don't use it all, they just go away. And we can't take them back, we can't apply them somewhere else.
Where's that rule? Is that a state in that rule?
That's the federal highway.
Federal highway rule?
Right.
That affects you.
Right.
If you see money sitting there that you can't get to.
Right. And when we do our quarterly meetings, when you get to the end of the project, remember, if you recollect, Mercy and Brianne are saying, hey, I see here that there's $15,350 left on your right-of-way. Are you done buying right-of-way? Yes, I am. Okay, we'll just zero that out. Well, that's $15,000 that we cannot use anywhere else. So if we reduce it down to 70%, then we're hoping to eliminate that. Yeah, it's going to be tough going to your council or to your mayor and saying, NERC is only going to give us 70%, not 80% for our PE or our right-of-way. But then if you look at it on the other point, it's being applied to everybody, so we're not singling out anyone. Number 5, project selection shall be based upon construction funding or NERC's long-range plan. Only those projects selected for construction and awarded CN funds shall be eligible for PE and or right-of-way. PE and right-of-way funding will be given only after CN, all projects of CN will be awarded. Exceptions will be made for transformer projects specifically mentioned in NERC's long-range plan. And then at the end, after all CN's been awarded, if we have any extra funds, we do allow the next project to be awarded, the next highest scoring project to be awarded PE or right-of-way. And I'll throw that clarification in there.
Can I ask a point of clarification, Russ? Are we gonna define transformative projects somehow, or like allow or empower a committee to just decide what the transformative project is, or is that on the list already?
In number 23, we will.
Okay.
Number 6, if funding for PE right-of-way is awarded by NERC, the phase will start within that fiscal year of this program. If the sponsor cannot show that this phase has begun, the entire project may lose its funding. So this will be something that we discuss in quarterly meetings. Number 7, the application must include a map of sufficient of scale to clearly identify the beginning and ending points of the project. Please include photographs or other visuals that identify the scope of work required. Number 8, the project must let in the fiscal year that is programmed. So we kind of work with these in quarterly meetings. If you can't, you do run the risk of moving outside of the tip, which would be moving into a year that is in the way far out. We fully obligate or allocate all of our funds for our next 4 or 5 years. So, and if you can't make yours, then I can't just move it to another year. For instance, 25 is balanced, 26 is balanced, 27 is balanced, 28 I have some room. If you can't make a project this year, I would move it to 28. So that's something to keep in mind when you're talking with your consultants or talking with your mayor, as we explained in the new administration workshop. If you're a committee council person, or if you're a mayor, one-time mayor, one-term mayor, I should say, or one-term councilman, you may not see your project. You probably won't see your project come to fruition, because it takes 4 years or longer for a project to come to construction. Which means if you don't get very lucky, the person behind you is going to take credit for it. Number 9, the project as submitted in NOFA should not change the scope in a way that it appears to be an entirely different project. All changes must follow the project substitution and scope change guidelines as approved by TROC. So we do have a policy. Basically, you take your new scope and you score it, and it must score at least as good or better as your previous project. If it doesn't score as good, then we would look at all the projects in there, and if there was another project that scored better than this one, we would be expected to take away the funds for your project and give it to the other community, if they could use those funds. The other project, I should say. You look puzzled, Tom.
No.
Okay.
Let's listen.
Okay. Number 10, if an LPA wishes to change the scope of a project or phase of a project after being awarded, the LPA must follow the project scope and guidelines. I may have to look at those, but those appear to be the same. If a project is applying for funds for CMAQ or HSIP, additional eligibility determination must be met. If you're looking at CMAQ, you do need to fill out a CMAQ calculation sheet. If you're looking at HSIP funding, one of the things you need to do is road safety audit. And we are going to start doing those this summer. And we are going to be doing those annually. So we're looking to do 3 to 5 projects annually. If there's a greater need, we can do those. Unless you're doing a systemic improvement. And there are some things that, for instance, if you want to if you want to update all of the street signs within your city or town, that's a systemic item. And we just fill out a 1-page simple form, send it in, and they approve it. And we can go back, we can start using HSIP funds on that. 12, if during construction, change orders will be limited to 10% of the CNM letting amount or less than $100,000, depending upon available funds. Change orders of $100,000 or greater, or accumulation of change orders for any project equaling or greater than $100,000 will be subject to T-ROC approval. So,
Yeah, the 100,000 is the max.
that you
Apply,
can, right.
right, go up.
Now, and I have to, when I get these requests in, and that's why I ask you to give me as much notice. If you're doing a change order and you need more money, give me as much time as possible so I can let you know whether or not we can, NERC can participate. Normally we can, but if you're asking for a change order number 5 and number 6 and number 7 are all asking for more money, and it's all under $100,000, but at the end it's like $250,000. That's where we need to sit down and discuss it at T-ROC to see if we have the funds available. Because there may be someone out there who needs the funds that would not get those funds. Transfer of funds from FHWA derived sources to be flexed to FTA will be requested by NERC. In general, only for transit projects that have applied and received federal highway funds through the NERC NOFA process. 14, we are setting aside $250,000 a year annually for PE and right-of-way. And so that means that the next NOFA, those projects, they can get started soon. 15, if a project involves modification of NDOT managed intersections or roadway, the funding from NERC for the work of the roadway shall not exceed 40 or 45%, depending if it's an HSIP project, of the total construction cost. Basically, that 40% is equal to 80% of 50%. So either if it's an NDOT managed intersection or roadway, we expect you to have a conversation with NDOT and ask NDOT to pitch in. Generally, they will. I'm not going to say they will, but generally they do participate. If and it shows a collaboration between the locals and the state, so it looks good for everybody. But if, like I said, if you have something on an intersection on an NDOT road going through your town, city, you need to talk with NDOT and secure funding for the other half of that. It does reduce your cost down to 10% if you're regular STBG funds or CMAQ funds, or 5%. So, and it takes a roundabout, for instance, just an example, takes a roundabout down to less than $2 million for the locals. 16, if an LPA presents a letter of support from a private or public entity and includes a financial dollar amount, the LPA must show where those funds will be used, and NERC will take these funds into account with any additional request for funds. So we do track, if you say that XYZ Corporation is interested in putting in a traffic signal outside of their business, and they're willing to contribute, say, $200,000 of the total intersection modification, and then you come back and say, hey, we never received our total amount. We were short $200,000. I do have notes, and I'll point that out to you and say, well, you did say you were going to do, or sometimes an LPA will say, well, we'll take care of the PE. And then if you come back and ask me for PE funds, I'll say, well, when you applied, you got extra points because you asked for, you didn't want any PE. So. If you're planning to phase your project, please include a plan for phasing, proposed schedule for future phases, inflated cost estimate for each future phase, a financial plan for the entire suite of projects. All phases of the suite should be able to stand alone and rely upon future NOFAs for funding or other sources for funding. So if you need to break down a costly project, a $15 million project, you need to break it down into something, because we have a limit of $6 million. You want to break it down into 3 phases, that's great, that's fine. And we'll put that into consideration for legacy projects. CN cost should include CE. And CE is limited to 12%. I think we may up that. I think CE's gone up. So all CN and CE estimates should be uninflated and given in 2025 dollar amounts this year. So I go through and I inflate everything. In the past, we found that some LPAs were inflating 10%, some were inflating 5%, some were inflating it all. This way I inflate everybody at the same rate, and as I tell you, I can be a jerk to everybody else the same way in my inflations. But seriously, I do use, INDOT has a very, very good and robust inflation calculator, and it takes into account all the different costs. For instance, if you're doing a bridge, let's just say we're doing a bridge, you have steel costs, you have cement costs, you have labor costs, you have a bunch of different costs that go into that. You got asphalt costs in there, because there's not a whole lot of asphalt, probably. So there are different costs, and their calculator inflates all of those at a different rate. Whereas your inflation calculator or a consultant's inflation calculator will just inflate everything at say 3.5%. So I use INDOT's inflation calculator, and I'll do it what I'm telling is, give me in today's cost, and I'll inflate it. The other thing is, if we give you your project, we award your project, and you say it's going to be $3 million, and we award it in 27, and that $3 million is in 2028, then I should be able to bring back some money. But if you say it's going to be $3 million in 2027, and then gets awarded in 2028, well, then you need more money. So This way, if you give it to me in today's dollars, and I just run a spreadsheet and calculate it out for every year, and if it's in 28, and I'll throw in $3.5 million, if it's in 27, I'll throw in 3.4, or whatever the calculation is. Number 20, LPAs with projects in the TIP are required to complete in a timely manner quarterly reports and participate in quarterly meetings as set up by NERC. These reports and meetings are required by federal regs. So this is something I just keep track of, and if you don't do quarterly reports, you can lose your project. But Marcy and Brianne and I will keep you apprised of if you're falling behind. Number 21, point values are stated and the questions are the only points are allowed. No answer will be allowed partial points. So if one is 5 and one, if the answer is 5 points, 3 points, or 0 points, you can't get 1, 2, or 4 points. Okay. Going on to what Scott had asked for, a legacy project is described as a project that receives partial funding for CN, so that means any project that has been broken into phases would be a legacy project. Project that has received PE or right-of-way funding but did not receive CN funding. But in order to receive PE or right-of-way funds, the project must score competitively, or it's a transformational project. A transformational project, it must be listed in NERC's long-range plan by name. Shall be scored separately from other projects, may be part of a suite of projects in a corridor, and the two would be Kennedy Avenue or Willow Creek Road. Shall not cover more than $10,000 or $10 million in federal funds in any 2-year fiscal. May not be offered in consecutive years, so you can't use 2 consecutive years. We could look at that, but that would just mean that we severely constrained for other projects. Project must let in July of the agreed upon fiscal year because the inherent risk and the type and size of the project. We want those letting in July because if it slips, we have plenty of room. It seems like a lot of projects end up in March letting, and if for some reason it's not awardable, the project needs to move out of fiscal year. And as I explained earlier, I don't have money in 25, I don't have money in 26, I don't have money in 27. So if a project is in 24 and it can't let, it's got to be pushed out to 28. So I know all of you have heard me hound upon getting things letting in quarter 1 and quarter 2, maybe with a later start date. Quarter 2 has been very beneficial for lettings prices, so keep that in mind. Any project that exceeds $6 million for CN engineer's estimate cannot be broken down and cannot be broken down into small pieces. Shall be deemed a transformational project and will be reviewed separately from other projects on the top of the committee. So in other words, if you're more than $6 million, it must be mentioned in the long-range plan to get more than $6 million. So $6 million is the limit for CN. You can get CE additional on top of that, but we can limit that so that projects, we have a nice suite of projects to offer to everybody. And that's all I have. Any other questions?
Just for clarification, Charles, question 2 about that protect funds that Scott was talking about.
Yes.
Will you look at that for like that question too, to see if maybe that and minor collector get 1 point? Like, if
Yeah,
it's
I
allowed-
did note that, I did note that.
Yeah, okay, thanks. If it's allowed, then at least minor and that local.
Right.
Protect project can get a point.
Right.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Before you go.
Yes.
Next item is transformational projects. Porter County is the project for Porter County and Cherville. Either Porter County or Jeff, excuse me, Jeff Hewitt are here, so can you give us a update on if it's still on for this year and if there's any changes to what we know?
So, we'll talk about Cherville. Cherville has, phase 1, it has 4 different phases that we have in our tip. Phase 1 is the local tracks project. Phase 2 is the approaches to the bridge, the local tracks project. Phase 3 is going north of the bridge up to Main Street. And phase 4 is going south from Junction to 30.
And the start date on that was?
So phase 1 and phase 2 obviously need to be let together. Phase 1 is being controlled by NDOT, phase 2 is controlled by us. So we, phase 1 and phase 2 are letting in 25. And then phase 3 has been moved out, so phase 3 is now in looking at 29, probably 29.
Yeah, those are the two, we moved that, Willow Creek to 29, 30.
So, yeah, well, Willow Creek's on a different,
Oh, sorry,
That's on phase 2.
so, but we did say that,
phase 3.
we did indicate that we do need, those projects do need to get moved, and we do need to kind of clear those off our books. So we did kind of agree. We can't put anything to vote because we don't control the tip. For outside years, if it's outside year, then it's not in the tip.
But
We
everybody
did
had,
agree to give a serious look at Kennedy Avenue, the next phase of Kennedy Avenue. Now, Willow Creek has 1 phase, and that's going in 2026, phase 1. It has, I believe, 4 phases.
I thought phase 1 was November 24th.
No, it's going in 2026.
That's 2026?
Yes.
Okay, well, I just.
From my understanding that their NEPA document is being reviewed right now. So they still have to buy some right of way.
Okay, when in 2026? We have a target date?
Well, as we mentioned in the rules, July. Actually, I think it's July of 2020. That would be 2025. I'm not sure when that is like, to be honest with you. It is in 2026.
Who is at Porter County now that is, have they selected somebody? At Porter
It's
County?
Mark for what?
Or, Bob Thompson and
So Martin Bohopchek.
successor are both gone.
Martin Bohopchek and is the ERC, and then Mike Jabo is helping Martin along.
Okay, so Jay goes over there.
Yes. Phase 1 is going from 700 down to 130. Phase 2 is a bridge over 130 and the 2 railroad tracks. And then phase 3, 4, it goes down on, just punch on down to 30.
And about 680 down more south, about, that was the last.
What's that?
About where 675 is going to.
Yeah.
About 680 is what it could be.
Right, and I'm not sure what the exact route is beyond phase 1. I don't know anything about scheduled lettings for phase 2, 3, or 4, or 5.
So is it, but phase 2 would still stay in 2029 as we had discussed previously?
Well, we had discussed it if they're ready.
Yeah, I
so-
understand. But 2026 instead of November 2024.
That was last information that I had.
2020, or phase one is in 2026.
So breaking ground won't happen until November 2026.
Well, you may see things move around that time.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to, because I keep getting.
Utility, you have to talk to Martin, Mike, or their consultant.
Yeah.
So,
I'll
but we have the funds in 2026.
Okay.
Charles, I do have a question. I'm like, George, did you just say that the letting for phase 1 and 2 are this year?
Yes.
In the fall of 2024?
I don't know when, it's in 2025, fiscal year 2025, which starts here in July 1st.
Okay, and that's for phase 1 and 2.
Right.
And NERC wants us to have phase 2 kind of combined in with phase 1.
Well, it makes sense
Yeah.
to do phase
sure.
two because it's the work on both sides of the bridge.
That's great.
Junction to, up to the bridge, and
Right.
then the bridge to Oak.
Oak, or I think just to Oak.
Yeah, so that's where those, and that makes sense to lift them all together at the same time.
And did you say phase 3 though is still not on the books until 2020? What did you say?
It's not in the tip. The construction for phase three is not in the tip.
Yeah, we moved that out to, like, 2029, the group with Jeff.
So we discussed that
Discussed it.
possibly giving it preferential treatment
Yeah, 2029.
in 29.
So clarification, would we be expecting the town to submit an application for that phase 3 in the NOFA, or do we already have all the materials?
We have all the materials. Actually, we did talk about projects that were pushed out if they submit something.
Yeah, I think
It
it's
might
like
be
a
as
letter.
simple as a letter
Yeah.
saying, we want to continue with this project.
Well, yeah, I'm not aware that the phase 3 was pushed back to 2029, you're saying 21. I thought it was going to correspond in with the finish of phase 2.
Phase three has a lot of right of way on it. So,
Okay. I'll talk to our staff.
yeah. And actually, we're meeting, I'm not sure when Cheryl was, but we do have quarterly meetings next week. Next week and the following week.
Okay,
So if you want to jump in on that.
okay.
Um,
All right. Thank you, Jim. Any other questions for Charles? Thank you for covering that part too, Charles, and on the transformation on the spring projects update. Anything else, Scott?
So we already talked about both Willow Creek and Kennedy Avenue. Thank you, Charles, for filling in some of those details. The only other space on this agenda is also for other discretionary project awards, such as the full commission, or sorry, the executive board heard a presentation about the I-8094 Flex Road that's getting a mega grant, $127 million for their Transportation Systems Management and Operations, or TSMO project, from I-65 to Illinois 394, just across the state line. So that was a good presentation that the commission heard back in March. That recently was awarded in December. So if there's any questions or details about that you would like to know, or if anybody has anything to share, we can talk about that. The other possibilities are the Safe Streets and Roads for All grants from the U.S. Department of Transportation. There are about, I think, 5 communities now actively working on safety action plans. Hammond, East Chicago, Highland, and Burns Harbor, as far as I'm aware, are actively working on or have been awarded for safety action plans. So expect to see more of those in the future. And they're not necessarily going to get any preferential treatment per se in the NOFA framework that NERC administers, just because they've been working on those. That's a separate discretionary grant program opportunity, but we do encourage other communities to explore applying for those as well. So, any discussions on those topics?
Any further discussion? And Scott, I know I asked you and Charles, is it possible to get a copy, a hard copy of that rules and regulations?
Yes.
That you got?
Yeah, actually, I think it might, if you look at our NOFA, those are pretty much the same. Or any past NOFA. And those have changed, but I can give you a copy, I can give you this copy.
We all, I think we all like the copy.
Yeah. Like I said, we like this NOFA application format. I like the NOFA application format. So it doesn't change much. We just try to plug any holes that people have taken advantage of. So, but I can send it out to everybody here.
Please. Thank you. Next item is staff updates. Scott?
So the first one I'll talk about is the performance measure update for the first quarter of this calendar year, 2024, as well as the entire calendar year 2023, since we did not have a January meeting to discuss those. So we're going to talk about the crash performance measures and the safety performance measures, travel time reliability, freight, and congestion. So looking at just kind of the overall first quarter of 2024 in terms of the number of crashes, we saw about 5,113 in our 3-county region in that quarter, and 1,182 injuries from crashes that same quarter, 14 fatalities. And now we're breaking this down by county, and this looks also at the previous 4 quarters, so we can compare first quarter of 2024 to the first quarter of 2023, for example. In Lake County, it actually looked, the first quarter of 2024 looked almost identical to the first quarter of 2023 in terms of the total collisions, 3,467, so slightly higher than the 3,430 that we saw a year earlier. And of course, that's way down from the summer and or the fall quarters, which are much higher, and that just kind of follows seasonal trends. Property damage collisions, again, very, very similar to the quarter in 2023. The injury collisions did slightly increase from 562 to 571 a year earlier. But it was good that it was down from the summer, where it was as high as 838 in the third quarter of 2023. And the total number of injuries, not just the collisions that result in injuries, also slightly increased, but pretty much was very similar to that same first quarter of 2023. So it stayed at 773. And as you can see, for all these other metrics, they're not that high. But I do want to call your attention to the fatality collisions, which went from 12 in the first quarter of 2023 down to 7 in the first quarter of 2024. And the total fatalities was half as high in the first quarter of 2024 as it was in the first quarter of 2023, and did get as high as 15 in the third quarter of 2023.
Scott, does that take into account pedestrians and other on-road road users?
Yes, it does. Ostensibly, if there was a report written up in by the Indiana State Police or the jurisdictions that report to areas of the local police departments, then it should be reflected. So, and then in LaPorte County, this is alphabetical, I guess. The trend was a little bit different than in Lake County. We did see kind of more of an uptick in the first quarter of 2024 versus the first quarter of 2023. It still is way down from the fourth quarter of 2023. It looks like in just about every category. But the total number of collisions went from 656 in the first quarter of 2023 to 709 in the first quarter of 2024. The property damage only collisions also increased from 520 to 589 a year earlier. The injury collisions actually did go slightly down in LaPorte County from a year earlier, from 130 to 116. The total number of injuries pretty much stayed the same from 186, but did go down slightly to 163. And the, I guess, incapacitating injuries luckily went down from 22 to 12. From a year earlier, it was as high as 37 just in the fourth quarter, so that was a pretty big improvement in LaPorte County for incapacitating injuries. The fatalities luckily did go down a little. Any fatality is one too many. It did go from 7 in the first quarter of 2023 to 4 in the first quarter of 2024. But relatively steady. And then in Porter County, the trends were a little bit more erratic overall, but it was very similar to Lake County in that the first quarter of 2024 looked very similar to the first quarter of 2023. In terms of the total collisions pretty much stayed the same from 939 to 937 in 1 year. Property damage collisions did improve slightly from 787 to 749 in that same year. The total injuries did go slightly up from 214 to 246. The incapacitating injuries went from 40 to 34, so just a slight improvement. And the number of fatalities, unfortunately, went from 1 to 3 in that same year period. But again, all of these metrics were pretty much across the board lower than they were in the summer and fall of last year. So are there any questions about the crash performance measures or safety performance measures? Continue, still on 6.1, we'll talk about kind of the travel time reliability and freight congestion performance measures in the calendar year 2023 as well as the first quarter of this year. So this is the 2023 version. So if you look at we set a target of 93.0% reliable on the interstates in 2023. Unfortunately, we did not meet that target here in Northwest Indiana. The overall performance for the year was 83.9% reliable, so almost 10% under the target. If you look at the only months that would have met that target were January, February, November. The other 9 months, we did not meet that target. Of course, some of the summer months, we get more seasonal travel. We also get more construction activity, so these all influence reliability. But it's also important to note that even though we formally set that 93.0% target, that's actually the state target, so that's really the target for the whole state. We don't expect Northwest Indiana to quite perform as high on average as everywhere else in Indiana, including the more rural areas. But we were a little bit shorter where we wanted to be. Looking at how we're doing so far in the first quarter of 2024, we're looking very good so far, but we would expect to in the winter. January and February, we didn't pick up any problems with the federal definition of reliable, so we were 100.0% reliable in January and February. In March, we were starting to fall off the pace, 91.7%. Looking at a kind of a map of how that breaks down, well, this is for the year 2023, so this is looking January to December of 2023. The patterns on the interstates, you can see really the only problem segment was on I-80-94 west, or pretty much in Lake County, but especially west of I-65 or the Central Avenue area. And the problem was, reliability was more evident in kind of the area eastbound around the state line, where it was red. Other than that, there was really, and then slightly on the westbound near I-65 as well. So far, looking at the map in the first quarter of 2024, we don't really see any problems. It's all green except for slight yellow areas near the state line on I-94. We would expect that this will change shape as we head into the summer. Looking now at the travel time reliability on the non-interstate national highway system. So these are the roads like US 30, US 41, Klein Avenue, State Road 49, parts of US 41, State Road 2, etc. We set a target in the calendar year of 2023 of also 93.0% reliable. We actually did meet the target in Northwest Indiana overall the year. 96.6% was the actual performance. and you can see how that breaks down on a monthly basis. And in this case, just about every month looked great. November was just slightly off the mark at 92.9%. But overall, our region performed well on the non-interstate national highway system. We would not expect to repeat this every calendar year. It could just happen to be construction patterns that emerge. But so far in 2024, we are doing very, very well. We're at 99.0% so far. Good start to the first 3 months of the year, as we would expect, with not a lot of construction taking place in January and March. And then a map of what this looked like in the calendar year, January and December of last year. So yeah, what you see here are the roads that were included in that non-interstate national highway system that are being called out. So the interstates are not on this map. It's mostly all green. You can see areas just a little bit on southbound Klein Avenue approaching I-8094 where it's a little bit of light red. But other than that, really no major concerns to call out here. And how we're doing so far on the same map for the first 3 months of this calendar year, 2024, we don't see any red yet that's emerged, so that's good. We don't expect this to hold for the whole year, but we're off to a good start. So now let's talk about if there are any questions on that aspect of reliability. I'll move on to truck travel time reliability. This target is a little bit different than the percent reliable targets in that it's a number, so it's basically the lower numbers are better in this, and higher numbers are worse. And so the target that we set for the truck travel time reliability on the interstate was 1.32. Our region did not quite meet that target. 1.37 was the truck travel time reliability for the whole year last year. And the only months that we hit the target were January, February, and December. Again, it was largely not as much kind of construction activity occurring. But again, this is for the whole state, that 1.32 target, so we wouldn't expect to quite be at that level of performance in Northwest Indiana. And then kind of looking at how we're doing on the same target in 2024 so far for the first 3 months, we are on pace. We are at overall for the first 3 months at 1.28. January, we're actually a little bit not quite on target with 1.49, but February and March looks good. Now, what does that look like in terms of the map for the calendar year last year? There's a lot more orange on this map than there was on the level of percent reliability one that I showed earlier. Pretty much the entire segment of I-8094 through Lake County is either orange or yellow. And then there are some pockets on I-65 north of US 30 that are orange, as well as the toll road kind of near the Illinois state line around the toll road, if that makes sense. And then looking at the same map for the first 3 months of this year, the first quarter, similar pattern overall as what we saw last year, just not as problematic yet in that still only the first 3 months where we would expect to see any problems with truck travel time reliability yet. So any questions, I guess, please? Okay. That's all I have for the 6.1 update.
Thank you, Scott. Well, next item is traffic count program. Scott?
Yes, so we are definitely getting back to being in business with our traffic count program. Our van is now in condition where it can be put out into the field. So that's exciting. We've also signed the contract with INDOT. It's kind of basically we're only contracted to count on stations that they give us that are part of the highway performance monitoring system, count station locations. So there are finite numbers of those. We're talking about counting roughly 3,000 locations in our 3 counties in a 3-year period. However, we also are kind of assessing our availability to involve more communities that have requests where they would like traffic counts, if they support, especially if they're tied into other funding opportunities that we administer at NERC. So we're happy to have a discussion with any folks that are interested in what we might be able to do. We do expect to get more training on our traffic count program as we head into the traffic count season.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Any questions for Scott on the traffic count? Next item is road safety audits program. Scott?
And also, I'm joined by some other staff that are welcome to chime in as well on this agenda item. But basically, as you might be aware, we recently finished putting out an RFP or request for proposals for a consultant to perform road safety audits for the next 2, at least the next 2, but it sounds like there'll be an annual yearly program. In our UPWP that we just adopted at the commission last week, there's $155,000 of federal funding for road safety audits in fiscal years 2025 and 2026. So the consultants that we're still evaluating in the RFP evaluation stage will be performing road safety audits at least for the first 2 years from 2025 to 2026. I don't have more details to give you yet about who will be selected or anything like that, but we will also, as NERC staff, be aiding the consultant in choosing the location. We're looking to do, as Charles said earlier, about 3 to 5 road safety audits per year, it sounds like. So, again, that'll be helpful, not just in terms of the audits in and of themselves, but for leading to potential projects. It'll be kind of a pipeline of safety projects that'll make our NOFA process and other funding opportunities that we can be aware of and help folks obtain here at NERC more competitive. So,
Questions? One more item we'd like to talk about a little bit is, and this was brought up at the previous full commission meeting. Scott's going to touch on the committee structure for 2024 committees.
yeah, I know some folks were there as well. Last week, on April 18th, when the NERC full commission met, they did vote on realigning our committee structure. There was no definitive timeline for when the new committees will take effect. It was noted that the existing topical committees, like this committee, will be around on an as-needed basis for the NOFA purposes. But that in the next 2 months, so sometime probably by around June or so, we're going to try to launch these new committees and figure out exactly who will be staffing these committees, what the membership will look like. But anyway, these committees that have that are part of the realignment are the focus areas in our state and neighborhood statute of transportation, environment, and economic development, which is economy in place is what that's being called. But we're also adding a 4th committee called leadership. So essentially, there will be only 4 committees: transportation, environment, economy in place, and leadership. So this committee, this Surface Transportation Committee, would be essentially wrapped up in the Transportation Committee. But then there are also 3 others, and along with the Surface Transportation Committee, the PED, pedal, and paddle, and many of the functions of the Technical Planning Committee, or the TPC, will be part of that Transportation Committee as well.
Where did the land use go?
The land use is nominally going to be wrapped up in the Economy in Place Committee. Right now, we're still working on exactly what that would look like.
You'll send that out and notify all of us?
Will the chairs
Yeah,
of
chairs
the
will
different
know
committees
who
have
wants to
ideas?
go.
The chairs of all these existing committees will be made well aware of these changes. And again, the NERC staff and our great NERC admin team will get the word out about, as we find out more details about the shape that these board committees will take. I guess right now, the only date that was, I think, noted last week on April 18th was basically around 2 months, so sometime by around June or so, since we don't have any May TBC or commission meetings scheduled right now.
Land use was postponed or canceled for tomorrow, and any updates on that? I doubt that you have it, but I thought I'd have.
Yeah.
No news on that?
No, not at this
Okay.
other than to Mark's question, the land use committee by and large will be represented in the economy in place.
Which one's the leadership about? Which one's that gonna be? Is that the new one, right?
On here, this handout, it says that, yeah, it's gonna be the finance and personnel, which has usually met right before the commission. Will be part of that, as is the legislative committee and the outreach committee, which I don't think the outreach committee was met much at all, but.
I should add that, considering there were several bills in the last session that would have impacted Northwest Indiana, that some in the last week of the session were a threat until then, having some kind of legislative action or, something responsible for legislation that actually meets would be worthwhile, because NERC was kind of absent from that entire conversation.
Yeah, I think that was also, thank you for the that was important.
Good point. Any other comments on that? There'll be more news on that coming out, I understand.
I do have, T-Rock still remains.
Pardon me?
T-Rock still remains.
Any other business? Any other comments? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
So
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion's adjourned. Thank you.
maybe.
Thank you.